I've had,
Yeah.
I think the most I've done in a day is 3. And the hard part is editing it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't
So
know. I
hard.
don't
What are you
really even
using?
know. Like
What are you?
originally my goal was just basically to start reaching out to people to figure out what everyone else's perspective is on this, because like nobody really knows what's going on, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm just
No one
gonna
knows.
call everyone that I know, that whose opinion that I trust and who I think is smarter than me, and find out what their perspective is on this shit. Because like I
Well,
don't
I don't
know.
know. I don't know if I meet that criteria, man. But
Yeah,
I'll
I think
try.
you
I'll
do,
try my
man.
best.
I think you do. I think you're just a little bit modest. So anyway,
We'll
uh,
try to. We'll try to make it. Try to make it work, man.
yeah, no,
So
I'm
you
sure
just.
you'll shed a lot of insight. I think my interest, especially in the ag side of things, is like more on the land side,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Yeah.
and because that's like the biggest asset class in Canada by land,
Yeah.
or by land mass.
Yeah.
But supply chain and stuff as well, I think it plays a role in that. And I think we're just realizing now as a country that, housing and offices and retail and multifamily, these all have supply chains, and they also have like real market vulnerabilities. Like if people can't run their restaurants and so retail suffers, or people are working from home. Now all these companies are realizing. So I'm curious to crack open sort of your perspective on agriculture as an asset class, but also as a supply chain, on how that all works. So
Yeah. Yeah. We're happy to dive into it.
cool.
The thing about the sector and the overall attachment it has to people's lives is it's been disconnected for years and years and years. So go back to like our forefathers who settled here and built the railways, developed land, figured out farming practices. Obviously the Dutch, the European settlers that came here, including the indigenous peoples. Farming was a way of life, right? I mean, for a long, long time, even, we all know that, but I don't think we actually know that because we're so disconnected now.
Right.
So I think major trends have been urbanization, pushing people into cities, the knowledge worker, white collar work, has driven people away from this type of sector. And if you think of like our graduating class and people that we know that we went to school with, how many of them do you think are working on a farm or in a food processing plant right now? I could probably name you 4 or 5, and they're people that come from family farms, right?
Yeah, and we went to an agricultural school, so
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go. And a school that claims that it's one of the best in the world, arguable, but I mean it is a top ag school and vet school as well. So you now have I think a rapid rate in urbanization, but then you've also got to disconnect with the agricultural sector and all of its supply chains. So and that's why if you study that market a little bit, there's land investments, and the land is theoretically a real estate play, if you look at it a certain way. But then you've got an accumulation of companies and players later in the supply chain or value chain that own the whole thing, right? So they decided that they'd vertically integrate, and this happened over time. And now you don't really know who those middle players are. Ask an average Canadian who the middle players are; they wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't answer that question.
So it's I mean, we're talking about like Cargill and Monsanto and Louis Dreyfus and these
all
are
the
like
ones that the Karens are rallying against the GMOs and all that stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. If you watch Rotten on Netflix,
I try and not watch that kind of stuff, but
yeah, it's a bit deep. It's dark, but anyways, to answer your question and kind of address the point, I think you're seeing everyone work from home. People have time to realize what actually matters. It's water, energy, utilities, and food on the table, right? You imagine right now if we didn't have any food, it would literally be crisis. So like a full on international crisis like we've never seen before. So you're also seeing a decrease in the amount of family farms every year. It's going down. So from an acquisition perspective and from like a land perspective, you're seeing investment firms, asset managers, banks, larger farming operations, big commercial, coming in and buying out family owned farms that are operating and leasing it back to them. So it becomes like a land rent situation. And so what we're seeing right now, COVID's kind of like put this on the map and made us realize that there's a massive employer. I think it's one of 8 in Canada that work in the ag space, and we don't know where things are going in terms of the future of work, how we're going to buy food, how we're going to eat,
Right.
all that stuff. But right now it's kind of putting the sector at play and an opportunity to become more, let's call it, become more ready for technology in any kind of recession in the future.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's a trend that's echoed across a lot of different industries. Is that this instant necessity for technology to play a big role has forced people to adapt and therefore realize the benefit of a lot of these things and also the value of them. Before we get too wrapped up in the full discussion, can you just give me a quick intro and a little bit of career background to like what you're doing right now in the industry, and then and then maybe finalize it with like sort of what a typical day looked like for you, a month ago before this all went crazy?
So I decided that I'd take Bachelor of Commerce in Ag Business, Guelph, where you and I met. And I did, quickly after that, ended up working in Toronto in more of the financial setting, agricultural financial setting. Did a couple of things, supported a VC fund there that was investing in food technology companies, CPG companies, a couple of greenhouse plays. But I also worked with an entrepreneur in Toronto that was basically running an agricultural hedge fund, pretty much downtown Toronto. It was interesting dynamic, really good experience. Helped out on a bunch of things, and then quickly realized I was missing operational experience, more business development, corporate development type experience. So I jumped into a company based out of Mars in Toronto. Ended up being in the tech scene for a little while. So jumped over to a different industry. It was a bit of a tough move, but it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about tech, software as a service. So that company's still going, raised a ton of money. I think it's over 300 people now. So after that, I decided I'd pack my bags, move to Halifax, follow a mentor out there, and decide to pursue grad school. So that's my background. What I'm doing now is pretty much wrapping that up. As I mentioned to you, I was supposed to move to China. Didn't work out. I was supposed to move to New Zealand. Didn't work out. And so now I'm wrapping things up from here in terms of remote work. But on the side, I've been able to create kind of an interesting consulting business that I run. So I've got a couple engagements that I'm working on, including helping an investment firm out of Montreal and Ottawa that's looking to invest in agricultural and renewable energy assets in emerging markets. And then I'm also on a consulting project on the side, helping the government of Vietnam sort out its marine plastics problem. So that's the background. What I was doing a couple months ago, my life didn't change that much, other than less social time. I think for those who know me best, I put a premium on relationships. I take time out of my day to call people. I take time out of my day to grab coffee with people. I think I'm a relationship-driven guy, so I can't do that as much as I used to, I should say. So it's a little more Zoom chats, calling, FaceTime. But initially, a month or two ago, I was gearing up to get on a plane to go to Shanghai. So I was working from home. You know, the only things that changed really was gym, exercise regime, and the ability to connect with my peers.
I guess it also maybe put a pause on your um, trajectory of your career or whatever you were planning to do out there for the time being as well, right? Um,
Yeah,
okay. On an industry level, like what kind of change are you seeing happening from in the agriculture space? Is there, I know you mentioned that there's a forced adaptation with a lot of these technologies. Are there any other changes that we're seeing, on a macro level as a result of COVID, or I mean, I guess you guys are pretty crucial. Like, I guess food is really the definition of the most essential thing and so that's a supply chain that I imagine is going to be protected.
yeah, yeah. I think what's changing is, well, if you see a lot of the jobs that are kind of actually opening up um, during this crisis, it's all in the agriculture, food processing, or distribution and logistics, or healthcare. But healthcare is a different story. But if you zoom in on the agricultural space, so when you mention industry, I'd like to include that in something that I've studied, worked in, follow, read about, talk about, report about, as much as I can as kind of a young professional. But I like to look at it in different segments. So there's the farming side, there's the processing side, there's just distribution side, there's packaging, which is a huge issue with single-use plastics, and then there's grocery, retail, e-commerce, meal kits, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of going down the extended technology lane. But what I think I'm seeing across the board right now is how globalization is really at play here in the sector. Whether you're growing corn, whether you're distributing grain, whether you're packaging salami, or whether you're Pusateris in Toronto, you're feeling the impacts of the interconnected global supply chain of food.
Right.
The fact that we're able to get strawberries in the winter, the fact that you're able to get avocados at a discounted price, bananas are 10 cents. This is because of a global marketplace. So I'm seeing that across the board, the shift from very, I would call it, efficient system of food distribution, now taking it a bit of a hit in terms of a shortage in labor, closing down of borders, trade disputes, trade tariffs, trade wars, and a changing appetite in consumers. So I'm seeing a bit of a change there. I think it's hard to talk about the industry at large because
Yeah.
it's so broad, right?
Okay. Makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. What do you expect we're going to see more change, or like, does it seem like it's an industry that's eager to get back to normal and doing as much as they can to get there, or are you anticipating that some of the adapting that's going on right now is going to be lasting changes, or like where are things heading from here? Is it return to normal? Is it stay the way that things are right now, or is it change again or change more as a result of COVID? Like what does the sentiment in the market seem to be?
Yeah, I think it's going to change more. So e-commerce is one thing I think is going to take off. I really
Okay.
do. So I'm taking a course on the side through a buddy of mine who's an e-commerce entrepreneur. He gave me some of his login credentials. I'm taking a course through a platform on that, just to understand a bit better what are the fundamentals of e-commerce. So when I say e-commerce, I just mean the ability to buy food online without even touching it,
Right.
without even physically going somewhere. Uh, it's set to increase by, I want to say, 200 to 300% over the next 10 to 15 years. So I think what's happening here is a lot of the e-commerce models are being tested. I'll give you an example. A lot of industries have already moved down the e-commerce lane a long time ago, like early
Mhm.
2000s, like before the tech boom. You had e-commerce companies. This is not a novel thing, but for 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 retail, for stores, for food brands, they're a little bit slower to react, just because it's a bit of a legacy sector. Um, Now through COVID, because it's an essential good, people are forced to buy things online. Like I don't know about you, but we're buying meal kits here
Yeah.
through a couple companies that do it.
Yeah.
And so I think what's going to happen here is it's going to change more, and I think it's going to be two things. Business models are going to transform to be tech enabled and future proof,
Right.
and then what you're going to get is M&A. I think
Right.
mergers and acquisitions are going to happen. I think a lot of finance experts have always kind of said post-recession, best way for industries and companies to rebound is through M&A. So I could see that happening too. I could see retailers buying themselves out. I could see grain and feed companies acquiring and merging. We've seen it a couple times across the globe,
Right.
but I think it's going to change more. So it's going to consolidate. I think the same thing will happen with airlines. Initially out of the gates, we'll have a couple airlines that'll run. Same with ag and food. I think we'll have mass consolidation, and then on top of that, you're going to see changes in stores. Are they going to go cashless? Are they going to be virtual? Supply chains, how do you make them more efficient? How do you use AI to connect them? Merchandising through partnerships, and then I already mentioned e-commerce, but can you really accelerate the seamless online to offline transactions or experience, I should say? And then do you have that technology able to scale? So a
Right.
lot of these companies are trying to figure that out. And then the
Right.
last thing I was going to say is head offices. You have in this space, you have knowledge work, and then you have those that are on the front lines, right? They're stocking shelves. They're processing payments at the cash. They're bakers. They're uh, buyers. They're procurement people. How are you going to manage this change as you grow to the new levels that we're going to get to? I could see the sector looking to hire software engineers and product design and basically knowledge tech workers more than ever before, because of this situation that we're in now.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Um, is there anything that you think that people need to know or understand? I mean, especially maybe applying, the lens of talking to somebody in the real estate space. Like my understanding of agriculture is very much just from the function of land, which I do understand a lot in an urban planning context, growing up in a farm town in the GTA. Anything that you think people from my industry need to know about what you're describing is happening in your industry as a result of COVID? Are there any, be it positive or negative, but is there anything that you think that, these leaves that haven't been turned over yet?
Yeah, I think it's exciting times for the real estate industry. I think especially from an asset management perspective, you've got a lot of investment funds and groups that are trying to figure out how do you hedge uh, against inflation, and can you do that through rent yield and rent on land? So if you buy a certain amount of acres of land and you rent it back out, your rent yield, theoretically, my understanding is that it's an inflationary hedge.
Right.
So because it's cash flow, and I'm quoting a buddy of mine on this. He's an analyst at an asset management company. He mentioned to me on the phone that over the last 20, 30 years, I think, um, it's been that long since farmland devalued. So I think it's also important for the real estate industry to distinguish between arable farmland and actual land, right? So if you buy land up in northern Ontario, um, it's land, but what are you going to do with it? But if it's farmland, my understanding, the value has not decreased over the last 20 to 30 years.
Right.
And that's because the net present value of that land is based on future cash flows. And the future cash flows come from things like rent and just the overall asset price increasing. So if you're telling investors, or if you're looking at if you're working with developers or the real estate industry and thinking about how can you look at agriculture as a sector, I think it's through, like you said, it's through land, but you've got funds locking in 10 to 20 years of locked in revenue, just purely based off the simple concept of buying land and renting it back out to people who can operate it. It's exactly what hotels do.
That's how
But
real estate works, right? The passive income.
yeah, real estate. Yeah, exactly.
On that note, then, like, because you had mentioned, that thrall, or sorry, urban sprawl was becoming a threat to a lot of the farmland, and I imagine, like, just having this conversation, I'm listening to some of my investors, call me and say, oh yeah, that sounds great, but when can I develop it, or how many houses can I put on it, and when, in 10 years, 20 years, if it's just outside of the official plan or whatever, right? um, the type of farmland that you're describing, like, that would be lifetime farmland, right? Does the quality of soil deteriorate over the life of a property? Like, I know when I worked for King Township in the past, we obviously doing a lot of research in the Holland Marsh there, and I guess, like, they had to plant cover crops so that stuff didn't blow away or whatever. Like, is there a lifetime to soil or
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a soil expert, but I've got friends who are, and my understanding is that you can treat your soil in various ways. You can also rotate crops to kind of increase the health of the soil. What we're seeing now and this is a bit of a loaded topic, full transparency with climate change, is that there are threats to soil health and soil erosion.
right?
So now in Canada, that's a bit of a different story because we're not as exposed to rising temperatures per se. It's a very technical thing, but can soil health decrease over time? Yes, it can. It depends what you grow. It depends how you treat it. It depends how often you harvest. It really depends on a bunch of factors and including climate. And then the other thing I was going to say is an emerging topic right now is figuring out how to utilize soil as a natural carbon sink. And what I mean by that is using soil as a mechanism to sequester carbon. So you have GHG and CO2 emissions happening every single day, and that comes from multiple sources: transport, buildings, humans, farming, processing, oil and gas, fracking, and there's thinking out there that down the road people might be able to buy land and forests to basically find a way to value the land on its ability to sequester carbon. There's apps and not apps, but technologies that have been developed out there. So the soil health is almost linked to that as well. Its ability to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. It's a biological and scientific concept, but these are the ongoing things. But I think long term, I think it was Berkshire Hathaway. I think like maybe 5-6 years ago when you and I were at Guelph. I think you and I were talking about this. Warren Buffett made a decision that he'd buy rail and he'd buy farmland in the Midwest, and he bought. I think him and Bill Gates co-invested in CN or CP Rail, one of the big ones in Canada, because they realized the importance of land and transportation in that space. But there's the last thing I'll say on the soil health thing is it's a big topic now on what we're trying to define as sustainable agriculture. So you can maximize production, which is what every farmer would want, and maximize your yield. But you've got to think about soil health, and you got to think about the future of that, and the ability to kind of manage, because this is a natural phenomenon, right? Like we're blessed with land, but how we manage it and what we do with it is another question.
Right.
So that's what I've kind of been reading about and thinking about these days, is applying those concepts and utilizing land. But talk to any agricultural investor, one of the first things they'll say is land is a key asset when it comes to um, anything in that space. Like you want to almost have a rolled up strategy and have exposure to land before you have exposure to a certain
Right.
agricultural product.
Right. So like kind of get in there at the earliest point in the supply chain. I think Manulife also didn't they spend like 1 point something billion on farmland
Yeah.
in Saskatchewan a couple of years back.
Yeah. Vader would tell us more about that, but it's John Hancock Investments. They're I think it's a private equity or their asset management side, based in Boston. They went pretty hard on farmland, but they went into high value crops
Right.
and high value production. So cashews, almonds, cranberries. Like I remember reading John Hancock buying like thousands and thousands of acres of cranberries, and it just so happened that I think Manulife had exposure to Ocean Spray, like that
Yeah.
big company that makes the juices. So it was like a rolled up kind of play
Yeah.
there, where they'd get exposure to the land, get exposure to the crop, and then basically
Mm,
supply it into Ocean Spray. So it's a pricing strategy as well.
nice.
So yeah, so you're right. Manulife's pretty exposed to ag investments, and there's some other big boys out there that do it, boys and girls, I should
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
that are in the space.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. I guess people got to eat, right? And these,
Yeah,
I mean, I've always said I haven't had enough experience in the ag side, but I've always been interested in ag land. And
yeah,
but it's always for me, it's food and shelter, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
got the shelter side covered, but
What are you thinking in terms of, like, from a real estate perspective? How are you seeing it? How are you seeing that unfold? Because obviously there's the development side, which is,
mm,
what we just talked about earlier. The developer wanting to know when they can develop. They don't want to wait 20 years.
mm.
But then there's the other side is, would you ever see yourself buying and flipping land and like being involved in that process, but not for development, just
Yeah,
purely off.
that's like one of the things that I definitely want to do. So maybe
Yeah,
have a side discussion about that
yeah,
after
yeah.
this
I
call.
should.
But because
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I'm super bullish on the value of agricultural land. Like just like you had said, it doesn't go down, and I think that it for me, it's the resiliency of that food's necessity, right? I mean, you look at America as an example, like Detroit when America was going through their industrial revolution and the automobile and all that stuff. It was the most happening place on earth, perhaps, and now it's Detroit, right? And
yeah,
I mean, there's I don't. I'm just speculating, but San Francisco could suffer the same fate, right? I mean, I think that if you invest in these like very sexy, fatty, and trendy kind of places, especially if you wrap your real estate investment thesis around that. I think that that's it's not as future proof as you said earlier
yeah,
as some other things. And I just I evaluate now that I have a daughter who I love with all my heart. I think about investing, for 200 years rather than for
yeah,
20. Like
yeah,
I'm pretty happy. I don't care that much
yeah,
to improve my quality of life. I would love to improve the quality of life for my girls, but I mean they're pretty happy too. So it's what can I do for for my kids, my grandkids,
yeah,
um, and
yeah,
uh, and for me, farmland is huge on that. Um,
yeah,
I and yeah, it's same thing. Like great, it's great if sprawl gets to the point where I can develop that land, but I also see a lot of value socially and environmentally in protecting that land for crop as well. So that's sort of my 2 cents there.
yeah. It's a good way to put it,
Yeah,
because almost, I don't want to I want to say future proof. I believe that, but almost the closest thing we have to recession-proof assets right now. I mean,
Right.
I would say I would put land up there with the U.S. dollar. I'd put it up there with gold, and maybe some of these treasury bills, but that seems to kind of come down last couple days or couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in terms of recession-proof assets or whatever they call these havens,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd put
Beer
land up
too.
there. And beer, yeah, beer. And
Everybody needs a
people,
vice in a
yeah,
recession.
and people think cannabis is going to be big too, but I'm not buying that. I
I don't know.
think it's
I mean,
just
I think they had their heyday, and I don't know. The market corrected relatively. We'll see what happens. I don't know, but I guess it's just as enjoyable of a thing to do if the world around you is getting shitty, right? So it could be
yeah,
as recession proof as having a couple beers.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure. I mean, you could argue.
I use the word resilient when I was describing land, and I wanna ask how resilient do you think Canada's agricultural industry is to the threat of this COVID-19 thing by comparison to other economies around the world, agricultural economies around the world? Because I think that part of your research is that you're looking at a lot of these other economies, with the intention of going to study there in Shanghai and New Zealand.
Yeah,
How do we stack up? Like, are we more or less exposed? I mean, we have a ton of land mass, but are we going to be all right, comparatively?
yeah, yeah. I think if there's anything that's going to hold us back, it's lack of talent and lack of people getting into the sector. That's the first thing I could say is people overlook it. They think they think it means milking cows. They think it means um, slaughtering animals. There's no hiding from it. But you think of the opportunity to innovate, the opportunity to create new products, new supply chains, apply technology to some of these areas, like things like food traceability, like IBM's creating a blockchain just for food traceability.
Right.
Um, so I think, so to answer your first part of your question is, are we going to survive in Canada? I think absolutely, but we have to shift away from a commodity player like we've been in oil and gas for a long time. Um, here's something I've learned about the trade in global landscape of food and agriculture, because that's kind of where I hover, a little higher end, not higher end, higher level in terms of thinking.
Mhm.
Um, the countries that do best, a lot of them are actually smaller in land mass, and that's because they are forced to create new products. They're forced to innovate. They're forced to think about things differently. They're forced in a survival mode. So you would know this because you went to Switzerland. You lived there for a couple of years when you did your stint there. The Europeans are pretty advanced, but more specifically the Dutch. The Israelis are very advanced in agricultural economics or agricultural technology, we should say. So they developed like drip irrigation systems. They grow certain crops in the desert. See their seed breedings and the genomic research is incredible. The Germans are advanced, so for everyone who loves beer, they know that a lot of products and inputs into beer come from Germany. And answer your question on the Chinese front, where I was going to go and study, and New Zealand front, those countries lead the charge when it comes to value retention. And if you can't have talent stay and get attracted to the sector, you're not going to get to a point where you can actually keep value in your geographic boundaries. You're going to have a commodity play where you're going to ship out millions of kilos of whatever you're shipping out, and that'll be refined and processed at a different location. So I think we're going to survive. I think the best thing for Canada is through the COVID-19 thing is that we have an incredible link to the United States food supply chain. We have thousands of trucks crossing the border every second or every minute of the day. A lot of those are agricultural products. If they're not agricultural products, they're probably electronics or auto parts or cars itself, and oil and gas. But that's not really shipped by road much. So I think we're okay from a Canadian perspective in terms of food supply. But where we're going as a country, we have an incredible amount of land mass. We're blessed with these natural endowments that we have. I can't see us going down in a place where we need to get bailed out incredibly by our governments through agricultural subsidies. But if we don't maintain the flow of talent in the sector, if we're not able to keep value here in Canada before we export, because we're a net export of agricultural products,
Right.
we're gonna start hurting a bit, because it really, where it's at is value. So for those that are going to maybe tune into this, and for just for context, a good example of this is coffee. So everyone drinks coffee. I drink 3-4 cups a day, like easily.
Yeah.
I got a new espresso machine. I put in a nice expensive espresso blend in the machine, and
Yeah.
make myself a latte or whatever it is. That bean, that coffee, that espresso, whatever, you're paying $3, $4, $5, $6 for that at retail. The bag itself, I'm paying. I bought it on Saturday. It's just $16. Now that's cheap in real terms, in real dollars, but you think about further down the supply chain earlier, that bag is probably worth like 15 cents, and
Right.
they paid the farmer $2 that day for harvesting coffee and then roasting it, or maybe not even roasting it. So what's happening is you're getting countries that can grow coffee, and then it's grown and harvested, packaged in a certain way, shipped or sent up to a place that it can actually handle roasting, or actually handle the next process of coffee beans, and then shipped again to a place where there's a big coffee drinking market. And then you're going to have all the value addition processes there. You're going to have branding, you're going to have the flavor, you're going to have all this stuff that's kind of inputted into coffee. So by the time it reaches the customer, it's actually kind of completely disconnected to what it once was. Um, if those countries figured out how to keep the value within their borders, um, they wouldn't really be in the position that they're in. You could argue that it's a bit of political discussion at that point.
So that's a lot of second and third world. Sorry, like that would be those.
Yeah, I think second and third world, but in Canada, like we're not at that point, but um, we need to think big in terms of where we
Protecting
can
that
protect the value, where
value.
we can play in the global marketplace.
Right.
Last thing I'll leave you with in terms of the global landscape, foreign direct investment, which is a big metric for our international investments that come in to Canada. You would know this is two biggest things every year is real estate and land, and or oil and gas or energy. So you have real estate. Let's take that out of the equation. The other investments that are coming in from overseas sources is all natural resource based. So you have big investment groups and big wealthy people from around the world that are coming in and saying, we want that land from Canada. We want that mine. We want that forest. We want access to that fresh water. So we have to realize that there's international interest at play here, and if we have to protect that.
Do you think we're at risk then of being exploited? Like, I mean, it feels like at least from my perspective, and my perspective is very limited, so take it with a grain of salt. But that we've always been a sort of resource playground for the U.S. and other foreign investment. Be it softwood lumber or whatever the hell else. Hydroelectricity from Quebec, whatever they want to take from us. That it seems like they're doing. And do you feel like that agriculture is at risk of suffering the same fate if it's not already?
Not if we really rally and think about like a Canadian agricultural strategy that will unite us in a way where we take out the provincial barriers.
Right.
We avoid opening up the can of worms of government subsidies like supply management with the dairy sector. And again, I'll say talent. Like I'll give you an example. Like my graduating class is 15 of us. And
Mhm.
how many people in commerce at Guelph in our year? 2,000, 3,000.
Yeah.
My program had 10 or 15, and every single one of them was scooped up within like a couple of days of graduation. Multiple different subsectors of the space. If we don't have more flow of people coming in and thinking about this bigger picture, like the Dutch do, or like the Israelis do, or like the Chinese do, like we're not going to be able to compete. And
Mhm.
so I think it comes down to talent. Again, I really believe that. I think people can be very resilient in their own ways, but um, it it's a razor thin margin business up until a certain point. So you have to make it more attractive for people to come in, because if you're a rep selling whatever, if you're rep selling selling a finished good or seeds, um, it's tough because you're dealing with people that are usually cash poor but asset rich, right?
Right.
So you're in it's you got to create incentives is what I'm saying. I think you really got to create incentives, and you got to find a way to retain that talent. And if we do that, but also with developing a Canadian united strategy, we'll be able to compete. But as of right now, I'm kind of 50-50 on that view. I think I'm on both sides of the fence there.
What can individuals and institutions do domestically with their money to support that vision that you just described? Like, does it mean buying farmland, or does it mean shopping
I
local?
think it's I think it's through this process of isolation. I think people can start thinking about where they're procuring their food from, where it came from, um, why does it matter, and maybe even think about this: how am I able to eat what I'm eating today, even during a global pandemic, completely unprecedented, during a recession? How am I able to eat this? And people take it for granted, right? I mean, I do sometimes too. We're all guilty of it. Um, how am I able to eat this? And if people start thinking about it more, and if we create the right kind of discussion, whether it's an online discussion, a financial discussion, like creating real incentives for people to get exposed to investments in the space, or even like new product discoveries, you can kind of create a buzz around it, because we've been a bit slow in terms of Canadian innovation and Canadian kind of new findings. And when I see that Canada has been slow in terms of what we've created, what we've produced, I see it as a reason, or as almost as the answer to my question of why aren't people getting into the sector, is because there's a lack of incentives, but it's not widely talked about. It's
It's not
not
sexy
it's
either,
not
right?
a
Like nobody
wide,
wants to talk about it.
it's not sexy either, right? So, but you
You're
think
gonna
about
change
if you
that though with that hair.
think, yeah, I got to get a haircut actually. Now that I look at myself
Well,
here.
nobody look at me. I got like this Lego hair, man. I was like supposed to get my hair cut literally the day when this stuff happened. So whatever.
Yeah, you got to go for. I had I'll leave you with a funny story. I had a guy I work with, a really nice cut of hair, like nice gray slick back hair, like from a movie. And he comes on. We use Cisco for some of our calls.
Yeah.
He comes on one day and he's got a complete buzz cut,
No.
like buzz. The pandemic was kind of a real thing. I think everyone remembers that day. He took his clippers out and he buzzed his hair right off. So I thought about it, but
I buzzed my hair off a while back, and my hairline suffered almost indefinitely. So I don't know, man. I gotta be careful with
Oh,
that one.
really?
Yeah, like
Like
I don't know,
it,
the hairs at the front like don't grow out full anymore. It's kind of scary shit, man.
did you get a sunburn and like did it like burn off
I don't
like
know. No, I wouldn't have because it was
okay.
like in the winter. I think I just either stressed too much or I just have bad genes. I'm gonna blame my parents for that one, I guess.
Yeah, no, you got your dad's got a good set of hair. I remember
Yeah,
that
for sure. He's got some good flow.
at the baby shower. He
Oh
was there.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that was fun.
yeah. Before we sign off, is there any advice that you're giving or can give to, your peers, like people like you and I, on how to get through what's going on right now,
Yeah,
and then also on a macro level, how what companies can do to do that?
yeah. I think so. So I read a good piece by a guy that I follow who's former like a former varsity athlete, runs his own tech company now. It's just like a one of those people, just like a high performing
Yeah,
physical and mental person, like just physically and mentally tough.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, and I'm just going to paraphrase what he said, which is exactly what I was thinking, like kind of deep down, you know, getting through these times. If you have the opportunity to kind of hunker down, and cash is not number one. Now I do want to be mindful of people that are stuck in an unfortunate position. Dust up those books, like crack open books, get like 4 or 5 going at once, get up in the morning, do a workout, grab a coffee, call some friends, like build in a schedule, like build in the isolation schedule, and just treat it as like think about it as like a mental training camp where it's like you're forcing yourself to be disciplined, to not go in social settings other than buy groceries. And you got to like focus. And you're not, what are you going to do to, surf the internet all day and just check your Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn? I mean, that's such a waste of time.
Hmm.
At least that's what I think. Unless you're using those platforms as tools for your business or whatever it is you do. So I think the best thing I'm trying to do is read as much as I can. I've got a list of books I'm trying to get through. I've got some economist magazines I'm trying to crush. It takes forever to get through them because they're so long and so in depth in terms of the reporting. These are global, like it's a global magazine, or you probably know it. So it takes time to get through them. I get the weekly Economist, so I'm trying to catch up. I've got a stack like full of them from even like earlier this year. I'm trying to get through. Yeah,
Their
physical
podcast
exercise.
is remarkable, by the way.
Yeah, podcast is awesome. They also had that espresso app. I don't know if you heard of it. It's like a
Yeah.
3 minute scan in the morning, just quick when you grab coffee. Karpenko is a big fan of Economist. He got me hooked on that. So the reading side is done. Online courses. If you're interested in a topic, take it. Coursera. I forget what the other one is. There's a free online platform
edX.
there. Yeah, that's the one.
edX actually
Um,
has all the IMF, International Monetary Fund, courses on there, which are freaking
oh,
unbelievable for
I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah, they're
I didn't
really,
know that.
really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. So yeah, like dust those up. Yeah, and then here's another thing I've been thinking about is financial planning. So as we're kind of sitting around, and we talked about this when we started the pod, um, the level of debt and the over leverage going on in Canada is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you and I's generation are going to have to pay for that. And I think it's important for people to kind of think about financial planning and the financial aspects of their lives. How many Canadians do you think budget on a percentage basis? I'd say 15%,
Right.
maybe less.
Yeah.
Things like cash flow planning, like things like just like debt repayments and just building that to their schedule and understanding of where they sit financially. A lot of people just live paycheck to paycheck and they just kind of, work a job, pay off the bill, pay off the rent, credit card, maybe not. But if you can like, look up a couple tools online, start planning financially, follow the stock market a little bit, read a little bit more about finance to get a little bit more kind of like comprehension around how you can utilize the markets as a tool. I think this is a good opportunity for all that stuff. I think we would never do that running around with our day-to-day lives. I mean, it's just, you and I would, but I mean, it's not for everyone, right?
No, for sure.
And for the average people, I think it's important times.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the last thing I say, more of a humanitarian perspective, is check in with the elderly. Um, I thought about maybe grabbing some groceries for a couple neighbors that are older, and just doing the
Mhm.
run, and just give me cash, or e-transfer me for what I get.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
we've been trying to do that for clients actually, like,
yeah, yeah, that too, man. Because like I'm cool with putting myself in a vulnerable position of this virus. Like I know that based on the statistics, it's not as it can be fatal for young people, but not as much. So
yeah, like our likelihood of
um,
survival is the highest out of anyone.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So if there's little things like that from a humanitarian perspective, think about those that need it and give people a call. There's a lot of people that are lonely, man. Like
Yeah,
I keep seeing these articles being posted on LinkedIn by people saying, how to reduce anxiety from home, how do you work from home, how do you do this, how do you do that, and for those that may have addiction issues too, I think like this is the recipe for disaster, kind of being
stuck with
cooped
yourself.
up, yeah, stuck with yourself, cooped up inside, maybe naturally suffer from anxiety or depression, and these are really sad things. So I think it's kind of being a lending an ear to people, and I try to mix in some fun times too. So from like a social perspective, a buddy's birthday the other day, we all jumped on a Google Hangout. We just had a couple
Awesome.
beers virtually. So yeah, I think I'm just trying to find a formula. I know it's not forever, but
Yeah,
we're all in this together. But
yeah,
I think we got to look at it, look at the silver lining.
yeah, man. Good. That's amazing advice. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Um, let's chat quickly about um, some of the disruptions you're seeing in real estate with tech, because I know
Okay.
you and I have chatted about that for a while. I thought about this the other day, and you told me this too, just when we jumped on here. People are still selling homes.
Yeah,
Real estate agents are still doing showings.
yeah,
Real estate agents are still listing properties. But I thought about this when I was watching the news the other night. Virtual showings, virtual sales. Like
hmm
you and I have chatted about this before, like the tech disruption in real estate
hmm
transactions.
yeah.
Basically removing some of the transaction costs in real estate. Do you think this is a time for all that to kind of materialize, or like where's your head at on that?
Yeah, I do. I think that if it was going to materialize, it'll happen now, but I really don't believe it's going to. And um, I mean, you look at how easily most industries have been disrupted by technology, and then you look at one that's as lucrative as real estate. Everybody's been chasing becoming the unicorn of real estate, and I've seen guys try and go peer to peer. I mean, probably the closest that you've got to it is iBuyers,
Okay.
and that's grinded to a halt because iBuyers um, is a valuation arbitrage, right? So basically, people will undersell your or underbuy your house because they know, and they're basically assuming the market risk. So they'll buy your house for 500K, and it's actually worth 550, and they'll go put it up on the market for 550, and then they'll make the spread because they can afford to hold it. So it allows people to sell their homes instantly. So that's one. I mean, and that's now they've basically just exited the market as a result of COVID because they can't predict the values, and therefore, they can't really exist. Beyond that, my mentality towards the way that real estate is going to advance with technology is that I think that what you're going to see is hopefully an erosion of the non-essential tasks that a computer is probably better off doing. And so some of that is like so if you take I actually wrote a blog about it on my LinkedIn, so I can send it to you, but basically
Yeah, flip me that.
certain things like that a computer could probably do better. Valuation could be one potentially, like automated valuation. You know, I mean, there's a handful of different things. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now, but you could create a technology that does a lot of different things. And I think that whole suite of technologies that will evolve will become what I'm calling now, which actually has like pretty sexy acronym, CARE, computer assisted real estate, like
Yeah.
AutoCAD. And so I think that the agent will get paid for what the agent should get paid for, which is critical thinking, and then everything else will be done by a computer. So you're basically like you're
Right.
an agent really assumes more of an advisor role, which, I mean, Canadian real estate, the whole thing's a joke because like they're all just basically peddling these we're calling it investments in housing, because that's
Yeah.
really the basis of our
Yeah.
economy. And I think that there will be a day of reckoning for that. Those people who don't actually have critical thinking are just telling, you know, their foreign
Yeah.
investors or foreign capital where to go. And that, I think technology is going to settle the market, but I don't know if it's going to have the impact that I once thought it did. And I mean, I built the platform that should have been the unicorn in that space. So I think if anybody's qualified to say that, it's probably me, right? I think that we will see, like, actually a good example would be like maybe blockchain, right? Like blockchain's a pretty good secure example of, I mean, land registry should be a blockchain. Like there's no, like, and that should start at the MLS. Like the supply chain of a real estate transaction should be MLS to land registry, the whole thing, right? And that whole thing should exist on a blockchain. Like there's no reason why title fraud and vulnerabilities like that should still exist, and they wouldn't with a blockchain.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think like from the blockchain thing is it, like the topic that I'm trying to figure out is this whole tokenization and like general decentralized ledger.
Right.
Where does that, how could that apply into real estate?
Yeah. So basically, like
right?
each property would be, I guess, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but I think that could be tokenized, and then basically each transaction is a new like line or
Yeah.
whatever it is in the
You'd have to mine it,
exchange, right? Mm-hmm.
and then you'd have
it'd actually been
yeah,
Treads.
and then I think,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say like the blockchain would power the system, and then you'd have maybe even cryptocurrencies used as the way to kind of transact. I don't know. And
yeah, you could.
You
could. I mean, cash is still cash, but I mean, well, I mean, most housing purchases is done with debt anyway. So
that's what I mean. It's borrowed money. So
yeah.
I'm not. When someone says they bought a $2 million home in
you're like, congratulations on your $1.8 million of debt.
Yeah, not even. More than that probably. But I guess what I've been thinking is, you know, is borrowed money, but you've got overextension of debt for people, and how they basically manage that is not as what I'm trying to say is not as rigorous, and it's not as disciplined as other elements to their lives, right? It's weird, right? You never borrow that kind of money. You invest in equities or bonds or stocks because it's too risky, and you're borrowing money to invest in future, right? Real estate's the same, but I guess what I've been thinking is, you know, how does tech get in there? It has, but how does it continue to kind of evolve? It's still a people business, sounds like, right? I mean,
first on the sales side, there was like a lot of micro innovation in like construction, and I don't know, man. I think that it'll be a very graduated process. Like I don't think that, and I mean, my perspective has obviously changed a lot on that over the past 5 years, but I really did think that it would be something instant, and I no longer believe that, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you're first person I'm calling when I get to that point. I don't own real estate yet, but
let's go buy some farmland together, man. I think it's funny.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm super down, man. I'd love to.
We should. Yeah, let's talk about it all.
Tell me where to do it, and I'll trust your judgment. I'll throw some dough at that. Absolutely.
We'll get the shipping containers on top too.
Yeah.
You still doing that?
It's the house that I'm going to build in Keswick actually is going to be made from shipping containers. So
That's amazing.
I'm just trying to get it through the building
That's
code now.
amazing.
So we'll hopefully make
Yeah.
some meaningful progress with the Ontario Building Code, with containers shortly. It's adapted on a
Yeah.
enforced municipal level, so it's town by town. And Georgina's been decent, but we'll see how it goes. I'm just
Okay.
gonna stop the recording here
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
continue our conversation.